Thank you again for joining us. As you know, a lot going on the ground. The ceasefire broke down on Friday. This is just a quick reminder. There were 7 rounds of hostage releases, of course, through Friday. The 8th group, unfortunately, was canceled. Hamas opened fire the following morning and, of course, refused to continue the hostage releases, and here we are now in phase 2 of the military campaign, which, if you follow the news right now, is very intensive, both in northern Gaza and in southern Gaza. And of course, I guess as anticipated, Hezbollah renewed fire in northern Israel in parallel to the renewed fighting in the south. So it's very clear that it's a two-front situation with tremendous challenge for Israel, both in the south and the north. As you know, hundreds, tens of thousands of Israeli civilians have been removed from their homes, both in the north and south. And there's much to be concerned with as we move forward. FELNET is continuing to work very hard on shoring up European support for Israel and for the need for Israel to continue defending itself, dismantling Hamas, and changing the situation in the north in a way that we will hear more about in the next few minutes. We, right now in Israel, have the 7th delegation on the ground. These are 7 emergency solidarity delegations since October 8th that FELNET has been bringing to southern Israel. This is a total of almost 100 members of parliament from all over Europe that will be in Israel with us since the beginning of the war in little more than 2 months, which is for us an extraordinary accomplishment that we intend to continue doing early into next year. It's very, very important that policymakers, that leaders be made aware firsthand, directly on the ground, about what it feels like, what the experience is in Israel, in order to continue to fight for their support. And it is a daily fight, both here in the United States, of course, where we are, or some of us are, and around the world, including in European capitals. So without further ado, we have a very exciting program today, an important discussion. Daniel, the floor is yours to introduce our speaker and topic.
Thank you, David. So, as you mentioned, following Hamas's violation of the ceasefire over the weekend and the outbreak of combat in Gaza, Hezbollah as well has renewed its attacks against Israel. Over the weekend, numerous missiles and mortar shells were launched towards the communities of the north, Kiryat Shmona, Margaliot, Shomra, and yesterday also Bet Hillel, where civilians were hurt and civilian infrastructure. But as the world focuses mainly on the south and the ongoing war in Gaza, we mustn't forget that Israel's north and all the communities bordering with Lebanon are fully evacuated. Tens of thousands of civilians are displaced, and there are daily attacks from Hezbollah. And since this morning only, maybe I have not the most updated data, so I will allow our guests to update, but if I'm not mistaken, Hezbollah took responsibility for over 5 attacks on Israel. So what considerations will Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah face when deciding the course of the next few days, weeks, and months? And what actions should Israel take to prevent such a major escalation? Is this the make or break of Hezbollah and Nasrallah's leadership? To answer these questions, we have with us today Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve Sarit Zehavi, who is a major in the reserves of the IDF. She served for 15 years in the military, specializing in intelligence. She's the founder and president of Alma Research Center. I think you can see her ops room behind her in that center. It's a non-profit organization in an independent research and education center specialized in Israel's security challenges in its northern border. She has authored numerous publications focusing on Lebanon, Syria, and Israel national security challenges in general. So, Sarit, first of all, thank you for being here. And so I will start from more of a general point of view and ask you we had an operational pause, a ceasefire that lasted over a week, where hostages were released every day from obviously the south in Hamas. But Hezbollah also kept quiet during this time. Is this something surprising? Are there coordinated and answering Tehran guidelines? What's the connection between the north and the south?
Long and short answer. The short answer, yes, if Hezbollah ceased fire while Hamas ceased fire without having any agreement with the state of Israel, so probably they are coordinated, yes. And renew the fire while Hamas renewed the fire. So that's basics. They are coordinated. They are following the same interest, which is actually the Iranian interest of how to inflame the situation on all of Israel's borders. But if I'm trying to be more specific and analyze the interests of Hezbollah, there are things that are different. And over here, it's important to understand. For Hezbollah, it's very important to put face as if it cares about Lebanon. And for Hezbollah, it's very important to create its image as the defender of Lebanon. For Hezbollah, it's important to create the image as if it is only operating for the Lebanese cause and not for the Palestinian or even Hamas cause. And, you know, we can have different explanations what happened on October 7th, that they didn't operate together. But bottom line is that Hezbollah is not interested in dragging Lebanon to war on behalf of the Palestinian cause. By the way, this was the policy during all the operations of IDF in Gaza throughout the past, 12 years at least. But Hezbollah is interested in executing its plans, its operational plans that were made almost a decade ago, and that Hezbollah prepared in the past decade and intensified the preparations in the past 2 years to execute an invasion similar to the invasion of Hamas to Israel. And it will find the time that it will believe it's the most comfortable time for Hezbollah. How do I prove what I've just said? I'll give you 2 examples. First is look behind me, and what you can see behind me is the positions, military positions of Hezbollah on the Israeli-Lebanese border and military operatives of Hezbollah on the Israeli-Lebanese border. All these photos were taken by me when I was traveling on the Israeli-Lebanese border in the past 2 years, sometimes with the FELNET delegations. And we could see Hezbollah very clearly. We could see the positions very clearly without even binoculars. This was meters away from us, and they made the preparations for an invasion. If I take a UNIFIL report, for example, today we all know that for part of the preparedness for an invasion is small crossings of the fence, touching the fence daily, every day, to check the IDF responses and to analyze where are exactly the advantages and disadvantages along the borderline, with the tactical advantages and disadvantages. In 4 months, between February to June this year, by the report of UNIFIL, there were more than 600 crossings like that on the Israeli-Lebanese border. This is enormous number. Okay, tactical crossings, not invasion, not tactical small crossings. These are all preparations. And last is a video that I want to share. If you can open a share screen for me. This video was published a decade ago by Hezbollah, a propaganda of Hezbollah. And I want to show you the video, and you will see the similarities between the plan of Hamas and the plan of Hezbollah with regard to the offensive plan of invasion. And you will see that the idea and the phases of the invasion are exactly the same on both terrorist organizations. I'm now sharing the screen with you, so we will be able to see it. 1 minute. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's all right. Yep.
Okay, so what you see here is a propaganda that was published in a Lebanese TV station, which is owned by Hezbollah. They are talking about 5,000 warriors that have the mission of seizing Israeli cities in the Galilee. The maneuver will start with a barrage of fire to the Galilee, just like Hamas had done on October 7th, intense barrage of fire to create chaos all over the Galilee, and then with forces to invade into Israel, 5,000 warriors, each force from a different place that will have a specific mission to get to a specific city or block the main roads in order to get to specific city. And they wrote the details of each city they want to get to, and also to trap Israelis as hostages to be used as human shields. The whole idea of Hamas, everything that Hamas executed is in this video that was published a decade ago. The similarities are truly astonishing. I guess you understand what I'm trying to say. So there is a connection. We don't understand all of it, but there is definitely a connection.
So regarding this, and now we've seen the connection, let's jump now to post-October 7. What's the situation right now in the border since October 7? Okay,
so in numbers, 60,000 Israelis were evacuated from their homes. This is in the areas which are 0 to 5 kilometers from the border. I myself live 9 kilometers from the border. This situation room is located 12 kilometers from the border. And it's funny because I can say in the everyday, we do feel that this is war. We hear, my little girl went to school for the first time in a month yesterday morning, and she told me I was afraid to go because I heard the explosions on my way to school. We hear the fightings from the border. So the change in routine, or the end of routine, or this awkward routine, is not only among those who were evacuated. It's all over the Galilee that I love so much, my home. Like 10, 15 minutes from home, I cannot go anymore. This is areas which is too dangerous to travel. Tens of anti-tank missiles were launched since this war started toward Israel. When I'm saying anti-tank missiles, I don't mean that they were launched against tanks. I mean that they were launched against homes, businesses, border lines, soldiers, cameras on the border, antennas on the border, and very rarely against tanks as well.
Again, very similar to what's happening in the south.
Yes, and these anti-tank missiles are more sophisticated and advanced than those in the south. These are Kornet missiles, Russian technology that has a range of about 5 kilometers. This is what we've seen in Bet Hillel yesterday, which is not a community right on the border like we have many like this. This one is a little bit further behind, like 3 to 4 kilometers from the border. Tens of rockets, about 10 UAVs, more than 100 mortars. Hezbollah used Burkan. Burkan is an extremely heavy missile that can carry 0.5 ton explosives that create a lot of damage, and it bombed an IDF very well-known base here in the region. 86 Hezbollah operatives were killed and some more from other factions, but it didn't change dramatically the strategic capabilities that I've talked about. 9 Israelis were killed, among them 3 civilians on the northern border. And as you said, every day, around 10 attacks, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, 10 attacks that crossed into Israel, and many others that IDF succeeded in preventing, attacking the squads that are about to launch, and IDF attacks against terrorist infrastructures in South Lebanon as retaliation to these attacks. So this is a low-scale war, if you like, a war of attrition that created a new security situation here up north that truly, in a minute, we'll talk about solutions. But for us, the people that are living here, we don't see when this is ending.
So, this is what before I take the conversation up north into Lebanon, let's finish before with Israel. So I have 2 questions after following what you said. First of all, how long can the Israeli population can support that? How long can a whole area in the north of Israel can sustain being evacuated? And how is it different, or is it a severe escalation since 2006? Obviously, that's the last big escalation with Hezbollah, but what is it compared to now? Because the number you said, but how is it compared to what was before?
The war in 2006 lasted 33 days. Okay, so people are already more time out of their homes comparing to 2006. Yet, during these 33 days, Hezbollah launched 4,000 rockets, which is not the case now here. The capability of Hezbollah today, if it will deteriorate into a full-scale war, is to launch 4,000 rockets every day. This is a huge gap. How long can we stand living like this? Honestly, I don't know. All I can say that on the psychological level, the more it lasts, the message that is being sent to our enemies is a message of weakness, that we are not living in areas that are part of the state of Israel. If you understand the geography, the distance between Metula, which is the northern community of Israel, and Elat, which is the southern one, is less than 500 kilometers. Israelis should be able to live anywhere in this short range area, anywhere and everywhere. And the situation like this is unbearable. And I think that what the Israeli government is doing now is first and foremost prioritizing the south, which is understandable, because to have two fronts war is more challenging. Even if we can cope with that, it's an option, we are prepared for that. It is more challenging, however we look at that.
I will poke you on that thought of two fronts war, but before that, in the video you've showed us basically what Hamas did in one way or another. So then the element of surprise now of Hezbollah is gone, but the escalation is there. So how long can they sustain? Because obviously, and also you've said so, Nasrallah doesn't want to open a full-scale war because it will undermine his position in Lebanon, and he doesn't want that. So isn't this just a tit for tat, and eventually, unless the IDF does a preemptive strike or some sort of counterattack, will finish?
First, let's start with Nasrallah. I didn't say that Nasrallah is not interested in a full-scale war. I said he's not interested in initiating that on behalf of the Palestinian cause. If you will have a Lebanese cause, and I guess we have some French here online, so let's see what will happen with the gas. There are gas searches now by Total that was supposed to give us an answer by October. We are in December. We are still waiting whether there is gas in Lebanon or not. Nasrallah may take advantage if there will be not gas found in Lebanon. It can use tons of excuses. It is already building the excuses to drag the situation into war. I agree that it's not going to initiate it just as it is now, but it is very comfortable for Nasrallah, the situation now, because he knows that this is unacceptable on the Israelis. So he knows that at some point, one thing or another will happen. This is on the Lebanese side. As for the Israeli side, I don't know for how long we can keep living like that. I don't know when the IDF will go for a preemptive attack, if ever. I do believe that at the time being, it's very important for the state of Israel to build the legitimacy for any campaign whatsoever, because we see how difficult it is with Gaza. We see what Hamas had done, hiding its munitions inside the homes, inside the mosques, inside the schools. Everything exists exactly the same way with Hezbollah, everything. And we need to remember that, and we need to spread the word about that. It's not that Hezbollah is having military bases that we all know. It's inside the homes, inside the schools, inside the mosques, inside Hariri airport, not only in South Lebanon, but also in Beirut. And it's extremely important that all the international community will understand that. Moreover, it is important to pose a deadline, exactly for your question, a deadline for diplomacy, because we cannot live like that forever. This problem needs to be dealt, and the interest of Hezbollah would be, as you see with the nuclear issue, it's the same tactic, to stretch the negotiations for as long as possible without getting to any conclusion or without getting to a physical conclusion that actually something will be done. How do you enforce international resolutions of this kind of, and by whom? It's extremely important that eventually everybody will understand that Israel will not tolerate that, and there is a deadline for that.
So in matters of the international community and the deadline you're mentioning, we know that France is very involved, not only with the gas, but also Macron said he's trying to work his diplomacy in order to prevent an escalation with Lebanon. What's the role then of the international community? Is it for Israel now to set up a deadline? And a deadline means what? Because, you know, we've discussed this just before the call. There's a UN resolution 1701, and that is supposed to be a buffer zone that prevents Hezbollah from approaching the border and attacking Israel. So what will be a diplomatic solution if this one is not necessarily working?
I don't have all the answers, but let's put it this way. What is 1701? Who is responsible for enforcing 1701? Who is responsible? If you look at the resolution, you see that the way the resolution was phrased, it is impossible to answer this question. It is impossible. And it was deliberately like that. And eventually, the Israel is saying that UNIFIL should fulfill its mandate with enforcing 1701. And the rest of the world is saying that Lebanon should fulfill 1701, and UNIFIL is there to help. And you've seen that in the past 17 years, Lebanon failed to implement 1701. And Hezbollah was even smarter, because when they were on the border, they were wearing civilian clothing. They hid under titles of environment organizations, Green Without Borders. That's the image that you can see on this side over here. They were using Lebanese as human shields, hiding the rockets in their homes. UNIFIL cannot enter to these places. Lebanese army is not even trying to enter to these places. Who should enforce the resolution? So that's why I'm saying the idea of 1701 with creating an area which is empty of any illegitimate military presence, this is a very good idea. But this idea is incomplete if the United Nations resolution does not say specifically the deadline for that and who is responsible for that. And if the Lebanese government is responsible for that, if it is not implementing the resolution, so something should happen. So Israel should have the legitimacy to make sure that its people are safe, because 17 years, it didn't happen. Hezbollah became stronger in these 17 years. And you know what? It's not only 1701. What about 1559? This is another resolution that people tend to forget. This resolution was made just before Hariri's assassination. It was intensified afterwards. It was reaffirmed in every resolution about Lebanon in the past 17 years. And 1559 says that Hezbollah should be completely disarmed. Nobody talks about that today in Lebanon anymore. Nobody is talking about it. So if French government is working with the Lebanese government, the first question that should be asked, what Lebanese government? There is no president in Lebanon. There is no head chief of staff. The government is an interim government, while Hezbollah is a member of this government, holding some very key positions in this government. And in a minute, we're not going to have a chief of army. What Lebanese government? Who are we working with exactly?
So at FELNET, as you know, we bring delegations of parliamentarians or from Europe. And since October 7th, we've brought 7 delegations and from all across Europe. And we give them the message regarding Hamas. We visit the South. What will be your message? What's the importance of Europe in this role? Because you say there's no Lebanese government, and there's a problem with obviously abiding by UN resolutions. What's Europe's role? What can we do?
My key message is that I don't want to be slaughtered or massacred, and I take this very, very personally. I fear for my life since October 7. I fear for my children's life since October 7, living 9 kilometers from the Lebanese border. That's closer than Ofakim to the Gazian border. And I want the international community to be with me to make sure that we are not going to have another massacre. Look what happened in the south. Israel and the international community contained the rockets. Since Israel had withdrawn from Gaza, thousands of rockets were launched again and again and again against our communities in the south. And each operation, we stopped it before defeating Hamas. And we all contained, including Israel itself, we all had a policy that we can live side by side with this monster next door named Hamas. And it ended with a massacre. This cannot happen again. This is unacceptable, this is unheard of, and there is no country in the world that would agree that this will happen once and definitely not twice. And the only way to make sure that this will not happen again is to make sure that this threat is dismantled. Now, I don't know who is going to dismantle it and how it is going to dismantle, and if it's necessary, it will be dismantled by war. But at least let's agree that it should be dismantled.
So that's my question, because we know obviously that right now the main objective of the operation in Gaza, the war against Hamas, is to dismantle Hamas. Is it possible to do the same in Hezbollah by military operations or by military attacks? Will the IDF, is it not something that will take months, if not more?
Is it possible to live under a threat of a slaughter? Rape? Mutilation? Is this possible? I don't know. Is anybody in Europe willing to live like that? This is how we live here. What happened to us up north, and I must tell you, I changed my point of view after what happened. What happened to us up north is that we watched the nightmare that was supposed to be our fate. Because we knew this was coming from the north. And for some reason, at some point in time, there was a decision that was made to start from Gaza. But the capability exists to do the same thing. And we cannot compromise on that. And I always thought that we should compromise. I'm telling you the truth. In the past, when I met your delegations, I used to say IDF will build its principles on deterrence and on alert using intelligence. These two principles didn't prove to defend us. We need to find a different way, and we need the international community with us in this, because now we understand that nothing will stop terror except for dismantling terror. It is going to be a short campaign? No. Is this going to be an easy campaign? No. Is this going to take lives of Lebanese and Israelis? Maybe, if it's war. So the answer is yes. But what's the option?
Message received. Let me ask you this. We know, and we said this several times, that there is a puppet master somewhat hiding behind Hamas and Hezbollah, not really hiding actually. So do you think that dismantling Hamas or fighting against Hezbollah and trying to do so will actually succeed without Iran not continuing to pursue its nuclear program, or without the IRGC still being very much operational all across the Middle East?
It means the continuous fightings. It means that, there will be two trends. Iran will try to arm these terrorist groups and others, and Israel and the West will try to disarm. And it will be kind of a continuous conflict. No doubt that Iran should be dealt as well. And as you already see, what is happening is not just Israel's problem. We already have a few attacks against ships in the Red Sea. That this is economic damage not only to the owners of the ships, but also to Egypt, because now companies would not want to go through the Suez Canal. It is a global threat. With the nuclear issue, it's a global threat. With Iran providing drones to Russia that attack in Ukraine, this is a global threat. Of course, the Iranian issue should be dealt as well.
Before I ask you my last question, I want to remind our guests to feel free to submit their questions to the regular Q&A. Earlier on, you mentioned two fronts. Do you think that is something that is livable? We already see that there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis that are displaced, same number of men and women in reserve. The economy is obviously struggling. If a second we also know that most of the IDF reserves are actually in the north, preventing and maybe deterring an escalation of the situation. If this front opens fully, can Israel sustain something like that?
We have a secret weapon. We don't have a choice.
I've heard this before.
Right. This is Golda's sentence, and she is right. She was right. That's the only way. But of course, as I've said, IDF prefers to prioritize, which is fine. It's better to have one after the other, rather both of them at the same time. But if we will have to deal with both of them at the same time. Now, what I'm saying is that we have different kind of solutions or scenarios that we can speak about when we speak about the North. So, okay, one of them is a full-scale war, and maybe anyway we'll get there. I truly don't know. Another one is a diplomatic solution, but not necessarily, as I've said, 1701. We need something much better than this one, and we need the international arena to be completely behind us in this. There are more options around creating maybe a kind of a kill zone inside Lebanon. Kill zone, not it sounds bad, but the idea is to create an area which, without IDF being present inside Lebanon, any terrorist that will come next to defense will be killed. But this means daily violence. And I'm not sure it will solve the problem of how you bring back 60,000 people to live in their homes. And by the way, daily violence also on the Lebanese side as well. And there was an evacuation, voluntarily evacuation there as well of a few tens of thousands Lebanese. Another option is what we call the security belt, just like we had in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know if our audience remember, this was not a good solution as well. We wanted to push the terrorists away from defense, but IDF soldiers were getting killed every day in this security belt. And in the Israeli collective memory, this is not considered a success with regard to security strategy. So I'm not saying there is an easy solution or a magic solution to the situation. I am aware of all the challenges that we shared here. But I think that the starting point should be that we all understand the challenge the same way.
I'll use this opportunity. You said about the 60,000 people coming back. From what you hear around you, is this something that people are discussing, wanting to come back, or that they're too afraid to come back? Is there going to be pressure? Is there going to be interior political pressure to act before they come back to their homes?
Of course. Israelis are saying very clearly, we want to come back to our homes, and we are not going to do that unless we feel secure.
Right.
We want to build the Galilee. We want to develop the Galilee. We feel this is Zionism to live in the Galilee. But we cannot live in the Galilee being targets of Hezbollah with these accurate anti-tank missiles or these Radwan commando brigades.
I'll turn now to David Siegel, who had a question for you, and then we'll turn to the rest of the Q&A. Please, David.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Sarit. It's always good to see you. I just want to remind everyone that 60,000 Israelis in American terms is 3 million, according to my math, if you multiply it by 50. This is not a small matter. This is a matter that Israel will have to, and the international community will have to find a solution to. So when Sarit says that this is what is necessary to bring these people back to their homes, I think we all need to think long and hard. How do we bring the international community to fully understand this? And I can't think, Sarit, of a better way of doing this than bringing you our delegations, because I was there with you. We went down into the Hezbollah tunnels, deep underground, maybe not as deep as they go, because it goes very deep, 22 stories underground. But once European officials go down and come out, they come out thinking and feeling and experiencing something completely different than they imagined before they came to Israel. So I think the value of delegations for all of you out there supporting us is there's nothing more important than conveying that experience firsthand. I just want to say, and we are towards the end of the year, so we'll be a little bit more assertive in terms of our development side of our work, you need to understand that every delegation that we bring to Israel is an average of $70,000, and that's without the helicopters. With the helicopters, it approaches 100,000. We've already had 7 delegations in Israel since October 8th. That's close to 600,000 without the other programs, other strategic dialogues that we engage the Europeans on. But I simply can't think of anything more powerful than bringing these delegations to the north to you, Sarit, when they hear from you directly with the maps and the photos on the border, and of course in the south. So maybe you can share with us, your experience when you bring foreign visitors to the north. What do they see that they didn't understand, and how necessary is this, in the coming months and years as Israel struggles diplomatically for an outcome in the north?
I'll say 2 things. First, now we can't go anymore to the areas that you mentioned, because these are exactly the areas where we have anti-tank missiles being launched all the time. These are the areas that you see behind me. But you can still come to Alma Center here, visit our situation room, participate in a simulation, which of course will be new scenarios, adapted to the current situation, to discuss all the scenarios that we just discussed. You can see the photos and the tunnels. I'm sorry, I can't change the screens behind me now, but in a regular situation, I can screen how the tunnels looks like behind me. I accept delegations every day here since the war started, reporters and others, and I meet them here, and I meet them in areas which are, from my hometown, for example, there is a very beautiful lookout that we can see all the Western Galilee and all the way up to the border, and even a Lebanese town on the other side of the border, 9 kilometers from the border, and we can go there. So definitely, I think that every delegation that comes to Israel to visit the south should go up north as well and meet us over here and get all the information. Some of it I presented here and other, to understand the similarities between the 2 fronts and the risk that we are living under. I want to say that other than the 60,000 Israelis that were evacuated that feel insecure, they don't have homes, there are 200,000 more that are living up north that were not evacuated, but living under the threat of the missiles, rockets, alerts, UAVs, and even invasion, as myself, by Hezbollah.
Like the Bet Hillel yesterday.
Bet Hillel was evacuated, surprisingly enough.
Sorry.
But Kfar Vradim, for example, Ma'alot, Nahariya, no. And you saw Nahariya in the video.
For our next question, thank you. I'd like to turn to Eli Al-Yashmerni, the president of the Iranian American Jewish Federation of LA.
Sarit, thank you for an ominous but clear report. People ask me, what can we do? Should we take a delegation to Israel? And I'm just wondering whether at this time in Israel, that's what it needs, or what is it, in your opinion, that we can do to help? Thank you.
Yes, I believe that it's important to bring solidarity delegations here to Israel, to see by themselves what happened in the south, to meet the Israelis, to meet the people, and understand how it is to be Israeli these days. This is highly important in light of everything that is happening in Gaza and the exposure that the Gazians get in the international media. I think it's important that people will come here and will understand what terror looks like and how evil is the face of terror, and the fact that terror is not only against Israelis, it's also against Gazians. Hamas and Hezbollah should be held responsible for the death of thousands of Lebanese in the future and thousands of Gazians since October 7th, not Israel. I think that these delegations should come to the south and should come up north. And you know what, even if they can visit the West Bank, to learn from all sides of the conflict. And by the way, to understand that it's not about the Israeli-Palestinian issue, it's something which is much wider than that.
If I may add as well, from 7th of October, we brought up to 100 MPs from several countries in Europe. And one recurring comment that we've got is that the things we saw, we don't hear about in Europe. So I will stress even more of what Sarit said, that the importance of seeing things from the ground here is very important to put things into perspective when you're not seeing things from the media and from other channels in Europe or in the United States. For our second question, I'd like to turn to Paul Mueller, please, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Oh, hi. No, I was just wondering, first of all, thank you very much for this informative talk. I was actually up there. I met you with the JMI group a few years ago at the Lebanese border. It was very great. Anyway, how many people in a delegation from Europe?
Is that a question for us in the current delegation?
Yes, when you say you've taken 6 delegations from Europe to Israel, how many people in each delegation?
In each delegation, we have approximately 20. Some are less, some are more. But overall,
Wow.
with the 7th delegation that we have on the ground today, we've reached about 100 MPs since October 7th.
Amazing, amazing. Wow, that's great, fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So I'd like to ask you, Sarit, one country that is in the north that we haven't mentioned is Syria. And also we know that Hezbollah is also present there, but also Iranian forces. Is it the next trigger, actually? Will the surprise come from there instead of from Lebanon?
Look, we know that everything that, all the capabilities that we talked about with regard to the rockets and UAVs and missiles exist in Syria as well. Also, different militias that are positioned in southern Syria, including Hezbollah. The difference is that IDF didn't publish the numbers. We don't know exactly how many rockets or missiles are in Syria, in opposed to Lebanon, that we do know the numbers. I want to believe that the capabilities of Hezbollah from Syria are less than the capabilities of Hezbollah from Lebanon, but they exist. And we already had a few incidents of mortars that were launched from Syria towards the Golan Heights since this war started, like I think 4 or 5 incidents, attacks until now. We believe in Israel that the basic assumption is that if there will be a full-scale war here, it will be from 2 fronts, Syria and Lebanon at the same time. It's a northern front now. It's not Lebanese front or Syrian front. It's a northern front. We look at that as one front, divided maybe to 2 efforts, if you like. I don't know about Commando Radwan companies or brigades inside Syria, you know, elite units, if you like.
Yeah.
But it's an option. There were a lot of reports when the war started of different units and Iranian militias that are moving towards the Israeli-Syrian border, which we couldn't verify. So as you know, as a civilian center that doesn't have classified intelligence, I cannot confirm whether there are commando forces on the other side of the border under Iran, but there are militias on the other side of the border. There are Iranian proxies on the other side of the border.
One other topic that we haven't mentioned is the Druze community, the Arab Druze community that are in the Galilee. They're very much, integrated into Israeli society. They fight and unfortunately die in the IDF in high numbers, and they're very high up in the IDF as well. What's the situation with them in regards to a war with Lebanon? There's also Druze communities within Lebanon. Some of them are related to each other. How do you see that?
The Druze in Israel, from the beginning of the 50s, committed to the existence of the State of Israel because this is part of the Druze principle. And the Druze principle is that wherever the Druze live, they are loyal to the government because they are a minority, because it's very important for them as a minority to make sure that they survive. They are allied with the government. Behind me now, by the way, I just asked my staff, I just asked my staff to put the tunnel. So now you can see behind me how the tunnel looks like from inside. If you cannot visit the tunnel, at least you can see it over here. זהו, תחזיר לאלמה בשחור כזה, שיהיה רקע. So the Druze here are part of that, even though there are Druze living in Syria, living in Lebanon. I don't think there is any problem with loyalty because, as I've said, it's part of their existence or principle of surviveness to be allied with the government wherever they live. Of course, there are dilemmas for the Druze in Syria around that where there is a civil war. But in Israel, I don't think there is a dilemma, at least not among the majority of them. And if there is, it's really a very small, very, very small minority. I can tell you that a Druze community right next to my hometown, we had 2 lieutenant colonels that were killed, one in the north and one in the south. And this is very, very sad for us. You know, the whole town was in grief when this happened.
Right. I'd like to turn now to Larry Hochberg, co-founder, who has a question for you.
Sarit, thank you very much for focusing where we have to focus, and that's on the north, because there's so much going on in the south. It kind of fills the cup for us to deal with at one time, and you really have it doubles. But when you mentioned you're looking for diplomatic support to solve the 7 not as unified as we'd like it to be. We have China, Russia, the African countries who are not helpful in this role. When you talk about international community, what exactly are you talking about?
I agree about China and Russia. Hi, Larry. I agree about China and Russia. This is different. You can see that very clearly when we speak about international resolutions in the United Nations Security Council. Each time there is a draft of United States and France around Lebanon, then come China and Russia and change the draft, including 1701, in a way that actually makes it ineffective. When I say international community, I first and foremost speak about United States, France, Great Britain, Germany, Italy, who am I forgetting in Europe? I don't know. But I think that in many places in Europe, and I've seen this with the recognition, with the designation of Hezbollah, many places in Europe already understand what is truly Hezbollah. And in many places in Europe already understand what is Iran, especially in light of what happened in Ukraine. So it shouldn't be that challenging. We just need to speak at the same language. You know, we need to provide the information. We need to make people familiar with what we have here. And I think that if we will make, I believe in education. I believe in information. Maybe it's because I was intelligence officer. I don't know. But I believe that if people get the very clear information of what is Hezbollah in Lebanon, they will understand that this is a threat that it's not posed only to Israel, but also to themselves. And again, I think that in Germany, this understanding already exists. Germany is a very good example.
Yeah, they have been more helpful than we would have thought. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask you one more question. Do you think that there were many conversations within the intelligence community, but also even, of course, research, that they were doubting whether Nasrallah will answer the call if Tehran tells him to actually, you know, push the button? Everything obviously changed since October 7th, but maybe now with things escalating even in the Red Sea, Israel is facing an endless amount of fronts. And let's say Tehran calls Nasrallah and tells him, now's the time. Is there a chance that he will refuse to do so?
It depends how much Tehran will insist. The relationship between Hezbollah and Iran is a relationship between a big global company and its in its biggest branch. Okay, if you take Google International and the CEO of Google in the United States, okay, and then Google International says to the CEO in the United States, you should do this, this, and that. And he says, if I do that, I am only creating a damage. This is a bad idea. probably Google International will listen to him. And if Google International would think that this is important enough to do so for the sake of the company, so it will say to its CEO, either we will replace you or you should do it. And that's why I think it's the same thing. Nasrallah is considered a senior CEO in this project named IRGC. Okay? And so the Iranians listen to him. His opinion matters. They care about what he thinks and they care about his needs. But at the same time, if there will be a point, which we don't know what is this point, that the Iranians will decide for their own reasons that they are going to sacrifice Hezbollah and Lebanon, eventually Hezbollah will have no choice because this is the big boss. Iran is the big boss. So it's a constant dialogue.
Right. And here's the pressure from the international community is so important to play here. I think before we finish, we have a last question from Natalie Gutman. I'll give you the floor. Natalie?
Hi. Did you
Hi.
call on me?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes. So, hold on one second. I just have to get my thing back up. Yeah. So I wanted to know more specifically as a ardent supporter of FELNET and what they do and understanding how important their work is. I mean, I would say that it's never been tested more than presently. And I wanted to know most specifically, what are the ways in which FELNET is seeing real impact of these important delegations in terms of the European leaders? Are they openly supporting Israel amidst these endless pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests in their capitals? Are they still reluctant to stand up openly in support of Israel? Are they finding the courage to do so publicly? I mean, what is FELNET seeing in real time in terms of all the work of bringing these delegations over and impressing upon them what's happening on the ground?
Thank you, Natalie. I see David joined here, so I'll let David yeah.
Well, Natalie, thank you for that question. It is a question about impact, and it's very important to understand what we're doing and what the Europeans are doing. And it's also important, I think, for leaders in Israel, like the Alma Institute, the person that you're hearing right now. She's the person who speaks to our delegations in the north. It's important for you all to understand what these delegates do when they go back home. So the answer is, first of all, they're all on social media. Some of them have millions of followers. It's one thing to have an Israeli speak in terms of PR and hasbara about the Israeli position. It's another thing to have a person like Benjamin Haddad, who is an MP in France. He's a leader of a committee. He's close to the president. When he comes to Israel and literally tweets from beginning until end everything that they've seen, the families of the hostages, the Shura military base where they saw the bodies, the atrocities and so on. So when you have almost 100 MPs, each one doing that on their own social media, going back home, working with other legislators, coming up with legislation, hosting the hostage families and families of survivors, and sometimes tragically of the bereaved that we've sent to Europe or that the Israeli embassies have brought to Europe, it affects legislation. It helps whip the legislators to do certain things that need to be done. If you look at the various countries and what they're all doing, look, you have violence here in the United States, including on university campuses and yesterday outside of an Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia. So it's not that, that you're not going to have challenges in the streets. You'll have them everywhere. But when you have the government of Germany clamp down on Hamas supporters, saying that it's illegal to burn Israeli flags, it's illegal to support Hamas. When you have the French government shutting down anti-Israel, pro-Hamas demonstrations in the streets, not always successfully. They do have millions of immigrants, and they do have many, many radicals in the streets. When you have the UK work on passing BDS legislation in the House of Commons, when you have the IDF thank FELNET for Germany's decision to shut down Hezbollah, and which led to other countries to shut down Hezbollah in Europe, you realize that this is a long-term, multi-year, multi-dimensional effort that we'll all need to engage in this generation. It's not from today to tomorrow. This is a long process. You know, it took, and ISIS is still yet to be defeated. It took 86 countries over 5 years to work together to push back or to limit the ability of ISIS to threaten the world. Hamas may be as complicated. It may take many years. It may take many governments. It will take the courts. It will take terror finance. It will take, you know, online incitement that we already mentioned today. But it starts with education, like Sarit said. It starts with bringing leaders together to understand what's at stake. And you know what? To realize that Israel's also changed, that what you're hearing today is the voice of a different Israel. We're not going to give into this anymore. And when Sinwar, as late as Thursday, threatened to commit the massacre again and again and again, you realize that this isn't an enemy that you can negotiate with. This is an enemy that needs to be eradicated, not different from Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan in World War II. So there's a lot of education to work on. And this is what we'll continue to do. And having leaders like our speaker today, there's simply no better way to do it that we know of. So thank you for that.